Good evening, one and all. Today, me, along with my colleagues, is going to present on Revolution of Egypt. Begin with, we'll begin with the introduction. We'll go through some facts of Egypt. So the first one is the history of Egypt spans almost 5,000 years old. As a united country, the map of Egypt is oldest in the world. Paro, Para, or Parion dominated for almost 3,000 years in Egypt. Before 31 years born of Jesus Christ, the Pharaoh's regime demolished and Egypt then became a state of Roman Empire. After 2000 years, Egypt was then dominated by foreigners such as Byzantines, Ottomans, and British. In 1952, after the revolution led by army, finally in 1956, Egypt was declared as an independent country. The total population of Egypt is around 8.3 million, where 200 people live per square mile. The population size of Egypt is 15th largest in the world. As most of the land in Egypt is desert, approximately 99% of people live only in the 5% land area. The Egyptians were great at inventing. They invented medicine, musical instruments, paper, pens, locks, keys, cosmetics, and even toothpaste, all of which is being used worldwide today. They preserved bodies when a loved one had passed away. They believed in preserving the body, which was called mummification. The Egyptians believed that this would make their soul live on forever. Even today, a lot of communities follow the same. The ancient Egyptians were kept busy by building pyramids. So far, over 130 pyramids have been found in Egypt. Archaeologists are still looking for more. Then we go through the facts and figures of Egypt. The official name of Egypt is Arab Republic of Egypt. The total area is 3,86,874 square miles. The population is 8 crores. According to 2010, it's 8 crores 44 lakh 74,000. The age breakdown is approximately 31.7% of the population is under 15. From the age 15 to 29, it consists of 31% population. From 30 from 30 to 44 age, it's 18.5%, and from 45 years to 59 years, it's 12.4%. And rest 6% is from 60 till 75. So cumulatively, more than half of the population is from under 15 till 30 to 44 years. The form of government formed is republic with two legislative houses. The capital of Egypt is Cairo. The other major cities are Alexandria, Port Said, Kahama, Suez. The official language used is Arabic, as more than 84.4% populations are Muslims. The official religion is Islam. The religious affiliation as per 2000 year was 84.4% were Muslims, 15.1% are Christians, and of which 13.6 are Orthodox and 0.8% are Protestants. The non-religious categories are just 0.5%. The unemployment rate from April 2009 till March 2010 was just 9.3%. The literacy rate as per the year 2011, the total population ages 15 older is 72%, males is 83.6%, and females are 60.7%. Infrastructure and access, Egypt versus other countries. So now we'll just look into the infrastructure comparison between Egypt, Middle East, and the lower middle income countries, which are other developing countries. So the main telephone, if you see the telephone main lines per 1,000 people, there are only 104 telephone lines in Egypt, whereas the Middle East and the North Africa holds 99 people per thousand, and then correspondingly lower middle income countries is 146. The waiting list in thousands are 583 in Egypt, 5 5,367 in Middle East, and 27,675 in lower middle income countries. The cost of local call per 3 minutes in USD is 0.01 in Egypt, 0.02 in Middle East, and 0.04 in lower middle income. The mobile phones used per 1,000 people are just 43 in Egypt, 53 in Middle East, and 110 in other countries. The international telecommunication, which is the outgoing traffic minutes per subscriber, is 33 in Egypt, whereas 58 in other developing countries. Now, if you see the computer and the internet, the personal computers per 1,000 people in Egypt is just 15.5%, whereas in other developing countries is 28.1%, and it's highest in the Middle East and North Africa, which is 31.7%. Now we go to the human and other development of Egypt. The Egyptian revolution of 2011 has made a significant impact, and it will be recorded in the political history of the region. The Egyptian 18-day-long protest was a short time for fundamental change in a 30-year-old dictatorship, but it proved how the foundation of dictatorship regime is feeble and fragile despite its strong appearance. In this presentation, we will review and analyze the main causes of Egypt's revolution in 2011 and consider the aims and the expectations of the Egyptian protesters from the public demonstrations against a 30-year-old regime of President Hosni Mubarak. The Egyptian revolution carries a challenging transition phase, starting out with the problems such as low foreign direct investments, a high budget deficit, a high debt rate, high unemployment rate, and a high poverty rate, and a low standard of living. In addition to the budget deficit is expected to rise from 8.1% in 2009-2010 close to 10% in 2010 and 11 as the interim government boosts spending to offset the impact of the political unrest. The temporary supply storages that followed the upheaval, coupled with the rising international prices of food and fuel, have been adding into the pressure of the domestic price level since early 2011. So now we'll go to the demographic and economic challenge. The unemployment and reliance on subsidized goods. The population of Egypt grew from 30 crores 30 lakhs 83,419 in 1966 to roughly 7 crores 90 lakhs by 2008. The vast majority of the Egyptians live near the banks of Nile in an area of about 40,000 square kilometers where only arable land is found. In late 2010, about 40% of Egypt's population live on the equivalent of roughly USD $2 per day, with a large portion relying on subsidized goods. Next challenge is the economy and poor living conditions. Egypt's economy was highly centralized during the presidency of Gamal Abdel Nasser, becoming more market driven under Anwar Sadat and Mubarak. From 2004 to 2008, the Mubarak government pursued economic reform to attract foreign investment and increase GDP later, postponing further because of the reforms due to the Great Recession. The international economic downturn slowed the Egypt's GDP growth to 4.5% in 2009. The corruption. Political corruption in Mubarak's administration's interior ministry rose dramatically due to the increased control in the system necessary to sustain his presidency. The rise to power of powerful businessmen in the NDP, the government, and the House of Representatives led to public anger during the Ahmed Nazaf government. Ahmed is monopolized the steel industry with more than 60% of the market share. Aladdin Elasar, an Egyptian biographer and an American professor, estimated that Mubarak family was worth from 50 to 70 billion dollars. Now, why a revolution was needed? The Egyptian revolution was the shortest of Arab revolutions. The Tunisian revolution took approximately a month to achieve its goal of removing the president and the main pillars of his regime. The uprisings elsewhere, such as in Yemen and Libya, went on violently for much longer, while in case of Syria, they are still going on. The Egyptian revolution, on the other hand, lasted for all of 18 days. In seeking to explain the collapse of regime that prided itself on being the stalwart of stability, the structural factors, circumstantial factors are explained further. In the governing elites, mismanagement of the Revolutionary Act, which was its inability to preserve the unity in the face of the rising tide for change. Now we'll move on to the structural and the circumstantial factors. The structural factors, which means the socio-economic and political pillars upon which states were built, in which dictate of the demographic, geographic, and institutional composition of politics was there. These factors usually change over the long term, and when they are not in harmony, they lead to cracks in the governing system. At that times, when the contradiction between these factors reach a certain level, they render fundamental change in the system which is necessary. Thus, they lead to a revolution. In 30 years of Hosni Mubarak's rule, Egypt had changed in many ways. By 2011, however, these changes had generated structural contradictions that brought about a revolution. Circumstantial factors. While structural factors were essential in bringing about the revolution, they were not sole factors behind it. The youth bulge, expansion of the middle class, and the media revolution all posed challenges to the political system that was failing to adapt the new realities of the country. But there was still a need of environment that was more conducive to revolution. Such an environment emerged rapidly in the last quarter of 2010 and in the beginning of 2000. That's where the development of Egypt began. The people in Egypt felt a huge gap between the poor and wealthy, which was reflected by the imbalance in the distribution of power and wealth. It also imposes unfair, unreasonable pricing that threatens social, political, and economic stability. In addition to this imbalance, which led to increased unemployment, recession, poverty, and wasting of wise leadership and citizenship rights. All the above mentioned caused Egyptians uprising. In case the government, private, and non-profit sector didn't take serious actions to solve these critical social economic conditions, these negative socio-economic aspects will be more rooted in Egypt. Learning the lessons of industrialized states that have to be achieved economic progress and social prosperity around the world from Asia to America to Europe. It is clear that the social economic market system that combines economic aptitude and social justice safeguards against the dangers and losses of social uprising and uproots poverty entirely. The promotion of civil society has become one of the pillars of good governance. The Arab countries, including Egypt, has always also been concerned with the new approach to the development. Thus, government shows their willingness to dialogue with civil society. At the same time, two phenomena appear today. On one hand, the strengthening of the weight of civil society under the impact of process of liberalization of media, which is independent newspapers, TV programs, new media, and on the other hand, a diversification of the civil society actors, which are NGOs, protest movements, action groups, various urban and rural groups have been supported.
What were the underlying causes, economic and political, of the collapse of the Mubarak regime? There are a bunch of reasons for collapsing Hosni Mubarak regime. These are economic causes. Inflation remained high at 12.8%. The global economic causes crisis slowed Egypt's economic drivers. 8.5% of GDP that came from tourism dropped in 2009 and 2010. Remittances from Egyptian expatriates working overseas, which amounted 8.5 billion in 2008, declined sharply to the next following years. Uh, Earning from the Suez Canal of 5.2 billion in 2008 declined by 25% in 2009 because of global economic shutdown. The gap between rich and poor is high in Egypt. For an example, 44% of the Egyptians are considered poor or extremely poor. The average wage is less than $100 a month. 2.6 million people cannot cover their basic food needs with their income. Another another important causes are political causes. Uh, President Hosni Mubarak had been in power for more than a quarter of a century. The government was highly corrupt. Mubarak and his family were reported and accused of making personal fortunes amounting billions of US dollars, most of which were banked outside Egypt. Elections were hardly free and fair. Opposition parties were kept in check by constant police harassment. Their leaders often jailed on trumped-up charges. Political pressure by foreign governments, including the Obama administration in US, who is most important Western allies of Egypt, wanted Mubarak to resign also. Young Egyptians who initiated their protest against Mubarak and wanted him to resign. This movement got stronger through Facebook and Twitter. What do you think the Egyptian government needs to do in order to get the economy going again and to attract foreign capital? What are the risks to the government of taking such actions? I think that political security would be the most critical change that the nation could make at this moment. Financial specialists and organizations have lost a ton of confidence in Egypt, and until they have some measures of sureness that things are ready, things are steady, and they are not going to return. There is also a risk of new government being as terrible, if not more regrettable than the one that it is replacing. The new government will need to work to adjust the financing backing, get subjects to work, and pick up the trust of the Egyptian individuals at the end of the day. What dangers do you see in the current trajectory of the Egyptian economy? What are the implications of these dangers for foreign companies that might consider doing business in Egypt? What do you think it would take to encourage more foreigners to visit, invest, and do business in Egypt? Would such inward investment be good for the Egyptian economy? Well, in my opinion, the danger is that Egypt has the gap between the wealthy and poor, where 44% of Egyptians are classified poor or extremely poor, too dependent on the tourism, what previously had accounted for 8 to 12% of GDP, now evaporated. Corrupt and unstable states that in just a few years from 2011 to 2013, Egypt has seen two regime changes. For foreign investment, that it cannot be based on large industrial entities. The investment basis cannot be too high. Foreign companies may have to reduce their investment because of turmoil. I think Egypt should stabilize political situation, make full use of domestic resources, give foreign investment, personal safety protection for encourage investment. The foreign investment will provide more jobs to solve the local employment problem and stimulate the surrounding economic development. Political risk in Egypt seem to be increasing again, and the country seems to be retreating from democracy largely due to intervention by the military. As a manager in an international business, how would the current turmoil and political uncertainty in Egypt influence your investment decision? And what does this mean for the future of the Egyptian economy? Well, in my opinion, foreign investment base should not be too high. A foreign investment direction should not be too dependent on shipping and tourism related. In Egypt, shipping is heavily dependent on the Suez Canal and could be severely affected by a global financial crisis such as 2008. In, in the past, tourism has been an important source of revenue for Egypt, but because of the political unrest is likely to lead to strike and other activities, fewer tourists also reduce tourism revenue. Then the tertiary industry becomes the recommendation like service sector in industry that provides security for people such as a security firm may be well suited for such unrest, and there has been a brief regime change such as 2011 2013, but there has been no real democratic or economic revival. The brief peace will be followed by greater chaos. To sum up, the revolution happened in Egypt shows final observation which are as follows. Egyptian youth movement happened which is led by journalists who are citizens and cyber activists. Authoritarian rules was removed but it doesn't show up any impact on the growth and changes to economy of Egypt. After the reform programs from 2016, they are increasing their estimation of economic growth. Also, they are creating business atmosphere, development of tourism, construction, and oil and gas sectors growth. Moreover, more international investment and exports are trying to gain the growth. At present, the Egypt's prospects are favorable, which helps to growth of economy. That's all about our presentation. Thanks for listening to us.